Hello, everyone. It is noon on Friday, February 23rd. I'm your host, Larry Apke. This is Relentless Learning. Today, we're going to do something special. Once a month, we do a little bit more of a deep dive into a particular topic. We have this show most Fridays. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments and we'll take a look at them after the show. What we're going to talk about today is navigating finance in a VUCA world. And again, I said I'm your host, Larry Apke. I claim myself now as a VUCA consultant and an Agile coach. I help people deliver more value sooner, et cetera, et cetera. I want to talk today first about some general housekeeping issues for this seminar, which is going to last roughly an hour plus. We have an hour and a half scheduled just in case there's a lot of questions. We will get to those. I can't see you folks like a Zoom meeting attending live, so I don't know who is here or who is not here. I am monitoring it on the side to make sure that the live stream is still here, but I can't see the people who are in here. Because of that, the interactivity is a little bit different, and the way that we communicate here is we communicate through the comments. So I would love to get your comments. I'd love to get your questions, and then I will see those, and we can respond to those either during or after the presentation, most likely after the presentation. You're encouraged to use emojis. There's the little emojis down in the, I think it's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So if you like something, you can give a thumbs up, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of fun. For your convenience, I posted some links to the things that I'm going to talk about later that I'm going to reference in this material, in this seminar, so that you have them, so you don't feel like you have to copy them down or anything of that nature. And this seminar is always accessible after the live event. You can use the same address. So if there's something that you missed, you want to go over it again, you want to take a look at it again, that's fine. I also will be posting it to my YouTube as well, so that you have access to it that way. I wanted to give everyone a free gift. This is something I've done pretty much through all the relentless learnings that we've done before. I want to offer you a chance to get a free copy of my newest book, Apke's Golden Rule of Agile, a focus on value delivery. I've tried to make it as convenient as possible. There's a QR code there. You can use that on your phone. It's going to take you to a page that looks like the left, and it's going to ask you for your name and your email address, and then it's going to send you a link so you can download the book in digital format. I'm not going to spam you. I will send reminders of relentless learning or other things, but I'm not going to try to hard sell anybody on this. I think that the information that I'm presenting is valuable. Some of you will find it valuable in your companies, and I'm hoping that you'll hire me to do some training or coaching or whatever it may be. This Relentless Learning every week is sponsored by something called the VUCA MBA. I don't want to get too much into that. That's a class that I teach. It's a 3-day class, roughly 2 days of seminar material, some of the stuff that I cover in Relentless Learning. And then, about a day of just working with people, their backlogs or their stories or other things, talking about their problems that they might have, et cetera, within their company. So 2 days of training, 1 day of consultation. It's all packaged up based on the number of people that you bring to the class. VUCA is an acronym that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I think that this is something that we can start to appreciate is the way the world is now. It continues to become more and more VUCA every day. When we start to look at the things that are happening now with artificial intelligence, for example, I mean, it is just really, really game changing, and the changes come faster and they're more disruptive. And then how do we as individuals, how do we as companies not only survive through these disruptions, through this VUCA, how do we thrive in it? And the way that we thrive is we set ourselves up a mindset for business agility, which is what the MBA and VUCA MBA stands for. We need to have a mindset for business agility in order to thrive in this VUCA world. So we have other relentless learnings usually every Friday. I say most Fridays now because we miss one occasionally, but we have the next 3 Fridays booked. After that, the reason I invite a lot of folks, they say, why do you invite me to your thing? Well, some of you, I want to be guests on the show. So if it's your first time watching it, and you've never seen it before, we usually talk about two ideas. My guest will bring one. I'll talk about another one. I refer to them as big ideas. On March 1st, Tanner Wortham's going to be with us. He's going to talk about what he learned about agility from his time in the Marines. I'm very excited about that. And then the following week, Ron Lichty, Ron and I go way back. He wrote a book, I think it was called Managing the Unmanageable or something similar to that. I can't remember the exact title. He's going to present exceptional user experience, make your mission a mantra. And then March 15th, again, about once a month, we do a seminar. I'm going to do a different seminar. This time I'm going to talk about the VUCA world and HR. Because if the world is increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, this certainly affects HR. And I think even HR professionals would agree with me, this is not something we do very well as far as crafting our human resources for this VUCA world. So I'll talk about that in a little bit next month. So navigating finance in a VUCA world. So I want to start with just some caveats because I think it's necessary. What I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about my experience. I do not have a CPA. I am not professionally trained in a classroom setting in finance. So the practices and the ideas that I'm going to talk about in this seminar are mine. I think it's useful information, but I want you to take it and bring it to your finance people and ask them the questions, because I think a lot of times we don't include the finance people when we're doing something like, or include them enough in transformation, organizational transformation, specifically in my case, what we might refer to as agile transformation. This list is not exhaustive, by the way. These are just some things when I'm thinking about the world of finance, the world of money, that I think are important things. There's no way within an hour I'm going to get through and have not only an exhaustive list of everything that you should consider when it comes to finance and the VUCA world and agility. And I'm not going to exhaust the topics either. Use these as a starting point. Though I will try to get into some detail, and based on your questions, I can certainly provide more information. I want to start with what I would consider my view of the world. If some of you are probably familiar with me and my practice, that's why some of you are here. You hear me say this a lot, that the way we view the world is really important. And I think that is true when we talk about the VUCA world and finance. When we talk about VUCA world, I believe the following things. One, the lenses we use are important. Two, agility is key. Agility is enhanced when we create a system, or the system under which we work has been optimized for agility. Most systems are not optimized for agility. They are optimized for other things, or somebody really hasn't sat down and said, we're going to optimize for a certain thing or anything. Right? These sometimes systems, they just kind of, they're amorphous. They just kind of evolve over time. I think, and I think there's a lot of folks that will agree with me, both historically and in the community, that one of the most important systemic issues that we always need to address when we're trying to create a system that is optimized for agility, that is optimized for value delivery, the incentives are important. Because I've often said that the way people are incentivized is the way they will behave. And there's an old phrase, I think it's what gets incentivized gets done. I changed that a little bit. I don't have it here, but I think what gets incentivized gets focus. And what gets focused upon, because we can only focus on a small number of things at a time as human beings, it's biological, it's physiological. What gets focused upon tends to be the things that get done. Just because we focus on it doesn't mean it's going to get done, but it tends to get done. Most incentives, but not all, are based in the world of economics or the world of finance. We know this because money, we do things for money, right? And it's important. The amount of money we make as individuals, sometimes our salary is an influence, it's an incentive. et cetera, et cetera. And within companies, it's true, especially if you're running a for-profit company. I mean, the whole goal of a for-profit company is to make a profit now and in the future, if we piggyback on Goldrat's statement. So there's different ways of viewing the world of finance or the world of incentives, et cetera, both, that will improve agility and optimize underlying systems. So if you want to be agile, if you want to be optimal, then you need to create a system of finance and incentives that will create an environment with which people can be more agile. And I don't think we spend enough time with this. I honestly do. In my practice, I spend a lot of time talking with people in accounting and finance and CFOs and people like that. I don't think all agile coaches do that, and I think we should, because we need to create an environment within which agility is something we can do. It's attainable. If you don't fix the incentives, when you try to make changes in an organization, you're swimming upstream. You're going against the current. It's so much better if we turn the current our way. So in this, I'm going to present what I call a few different lenses or mental models of ways of looking at the world, not earth-shattering, but I think important, and ways that not everyone thinks of, and not all agile coaches talk about, unfortunately. It's not just about doing Scrum in teams or doing safe and release trains. The first thing I can talk about is advantages of product versus project funding. It's kind of interesting to me that the two words are so close. When we try to pronounce them, sometimes I'll mess it up myself. It's unfortunate. I wish there were two different words. Maybe we can come up with two different words. But we tend to in the world of software, we fund things through projects. It's not optimal. I'll talk about that. I talk a little bit about CapEx versus OpEx. And the reason I will is there's been a number of companies in my past that I've worked with, large companies, who have struggled with this concept of capital expenditure versus operational expenditure. So I'm going to just give a few ideas on it. Again, I'm not providing advice. I'm providing a basis by which I think folks can talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about technical debt. This is related to this product versus project funding, so they'll kind of flow in together. But I'm going to talk about a way that I think we should start to consider accounting for technical debt from a financial standpoint, because technical debt is generally, if we're doing software development, it's a large thing, and we don't really account for it in a financial sense. So I'm going to show you a little bit about that. I talk a little bit about flow-based accounting versus cost-based accounting. This is based on the work of Goldrat and theory of constraints. Some of you have probably heard this before. Pretty interesting thing. I'm going to show you how using flow-based accounting gives you a more accurate picture of the world. And obviously, if you're going to be successful, one of the things you need to do is have an accurate picture of the world. The more accurate your view of the world, the more successful you'll be. And then I'm going to talk about the fact that financial incentives rarely motivate optimal behavior and knowledge work. A lot of us are knowledge workers. My world is really in software development, though everything that I talk about, I think, can be applied to other things. Maybe the CapEx, OpEx thing, maybe not, but it can be. Because if you're a knowledge worker, you do something like marketing, you do design, something like that, obviously you need to know that what you do is fundamentally different from physical work, and the way that financial incentives work, the way that motivation works is different in the world of knowledge work. And I think we need to be cognizant of it. So I'm going to talk first about product versus project funding and the advantages of taking this approach. And this is not new. There are some books out there that talk about it. I think there was one that says from project to product, a journey or something like that. I forget what the exact name of the book is. I'm going to speak from experience. Recently, I was working at an organization, and one of the things that we did is we're trying to increase agility throughout the organization, and realized that the way we were incentivizing and funding things was just not what it should be. And though What we did was not perfect. I'm not going to claim perfection. I'm not going to stand on the deck of the aircraft carrier and have a banner behind me saying mission accomplished. But what we did do with a lot of folks working on this is we took over $1 billion of IT spend and transitioned it from a project scope-based funding model to a product capacity-based funding model. It took about 7 months. I'm sure the work is still ongoing. I'm no longer involved with it. The key to product funding versus project funding is to think in terms of investing in a product. We invest in a capacity to do work versus investing in features. Now, a typical project goes this way or something similar to this. I think you all recognize it. We have some ideas and we want, usually for features, we'll talk about software development in particular. We have some features that we want to add to our software. What we do is we bundle those features, we take them somewhere, we make some kind of business case for those features, we go to some kind of group, we present those things, right? So it may take 3 months to even build the case for it. It may take 2 months before you can even get into a meeting where you talk about the things, and you say, hey, I want to fund this work, and then it takes a while before they make a decision. They finally make a decision. They finally release the funds. Then you finally put a team together, or you take the work and you throw it out to a bunch of disparate teams, and then they start the work, and then you try to integrate it back. Blah blah blah. This is typical project stuff. Reason it's not good is because what you're doing is taking a very long time. So your cost of delay goes through the roof. The features that you want to put in your software take so long that by the time you finally deliver them, they may not give you the return on investment that you want. I'm sure that some of you recognize this. What product funding does is it asks a different question. It says, okay, what are the software products that we create and how much should we invest in them? And that way, anytime somebody wants to make a change to the product, they can go directly to the product and they can say, here's the changes that we want to make. You can put that work on the backlog. If it's important work to do, it can go up to the top of the backlog. You can start it right away. So what I've told people is, if you look at this, and again, mental model and lens, is all work is funded in this investment type of work, right? Let's say we're going to spend $2 million a year on product X, and product X for $2 million, we can get 10 people for a year. That's investing in capacity. The question doesn't become what is the work that we do, and that decide what the work we do, and then who does it. We've already decided who does it. We've already funded them. We've funded the capacity. Now the question is, okay, what is the work that we should do? And the answer is pretty simple. We should do the most, the most valuable work that takes the least amount of effort, right? Which is Apke's golden rule of Agile. So we have every idea is funded, quote unquote, the best ideas get built. But my ability to take an idea and get it into the hands of my customer is greatly reduced in terms of time. This is the key to investment versus investing in scope. Because when I invest in scope, I have to do all the scope. So again, as I've talked about, project funding is slow. We identify the work, we bundle the work, we get the funding, we split the work into components, we give the work to a bunch of different people, and then we try to integrate the work, etc. It just takes a very long time. And one of the things about bundling the work into these things is we tend to build the work into larger bundles, because the whole effort that it takes to get the work approved is so onerous. We don't want to go with small pieces. But in essence, the agility is the ability to deliver the small pieces with the highest value. So what we're doing is we tend to take a whole bunch of stuff, whether it's valuable or not, and put it all together in this big bundle. And we know from batching, and we talk about batch processes, I talk about this in my class, some of you are familiar with it, the larger the batch, the longer it's going to take to deliver. We should do things in smaller batches. We should do less work in progress, but this project funding is incentivizing it. The other issue, which is a really big issue, and I'm going to talk about how we would account for it in a financial sense a little bit later, but projects are rental cars. We tend to just create features because that's what we're being incentivized to do in a project, but we don't take care of the underlying infrastructure. This is one of the reasons that we have this thing like DevOps and stuff, where we start paying attention to the infrastructure. The famous story about rental cars is William Creech, who was I believe he's a general or admiral or something like that, who was in charge of maintaining the fleet of naval planes, naval aviators. And he was walking on the deck one day, and he walks up to one of the people there, and he says, "Hey, why is the quality was terrible?" So why is our quality so bad? And the young man says to him, "No one washes a rental car." And Creech was flabbergasted. What does that mean? He says, "Well, I don't take care of the plane. I just change the oil or whatever. My job is to, trade out the tires. It's just a rental car to me. I don't own it." And so projects are like that, because who owns the product that you're building it under? Who owns the infrastructure that you're building it on? Not a lot of people. So when I'm incentivized to deliver the features, what I'm going to do is I'm going to deliver the features. But I'm not going to deliver the product. What I'm going to do is I'm going to probably cut corners. I'm going to have bad quality. I'm going to increase my technical debt. This is not theoretical. This is something that I think a lot of us have seen. I know I've seen it all the time. You're going to have long-term quality and technical debt issues because all you're concerned about is features. Now, if you're investing in a product, you're incentivized to do things differently. You're incentivized to look at the overall value of the product that you're building. The other thing that's interesting is when you move to a product-based, is you start to incentivize to create cross-functional teams instead of silos, because the entire team that you build around the product is responsible for that product. And so again, it is a matter of incentive. The interesting thing about it is it's actually easier to look at it once you have figured out what your products are. Now, some people have problems with that. And I'm going to tell you, it mesmerizes me. And maybe it's only because they've been awashed in project management for so long. Because when we're looking at something like software development, you have a physical manifestation of your product code. And it is put in some repository somewhere, hopefully. And you can start there. I'm not saying it's incredibly easy to identify products when you come from a project world, but I think it's much easier than most people give credit for, and it's much easier than most people make it. Go look at your code and figure out what it is. The other place you can look to determine your products is your customers, right? When I am interacting with a company, especially through a website or something like that, I can look at their website and I can say, okay, there's a few things that I, as a customer, would identify as products. I can look at the workflow. I can say there's probably a billing component. Okay, we've got a billing product. I might have a pricing product. I might have an invoicing product. But the customer will find them. Maybe you're too close to it to understand it. But look at your workflow. You definitely can probably figure out that you have a few products there. It's easier after you identify the products, because the question I have to do now is I don't have to have these meetings where I go over scope and determine whether or not the business case is worth funding. All I have to do is say, I want to fund X number of dollars into this product for X amount of time, usually per year. So as I said before, I'm going to fund $2 million into this product for 2024. Easy. I've made the decision. I don't have to make another one. I might re-examine the decision maybe on a quarterly basis to say, hey, I thought 2 million was good. Should I increase it? Should I decrease it? And the way we can do that is we can look at the backlog of the product and say, are we delivering more value? Are we delivering enough value? Do we want to increase the amount of value we can deliver by increasing the funding? Or are we at a point where we're getting a law of diminishing returns and we just need to keep the lights on for this product and we want to maybe scale back some of the funding, some of the investment? It's just so much simpler. once you get there. And again, this is a different way of looking at it. A lot of people don't even know this is an issue. In early April, I believe it is, I'm going to be talking at, I think it's Oakland PMI, about this particular issue. And the PMI, for those of you who don't know, is a Project Management Institute. I'm going to gauge whether people are surprised that this is an issue. I think a lot of people who are in project management probably never figured it out. In fact, years and years ago, I said we should add another P to the PMO, Project Management Office. We should make it a PPMO, which is Product and Project Management Office, because we do have projects and they should be managed like projects, and we do have products and they should be managed like products. It hasn't caught on, but I guess it will at some point in time. You heard it here first. Next topic is CapEx versus OpEx. For those of you who might not know what these things mean, it's capital expenditure versus operational expenditure. A lot of companies will try to take software investment and then capitalize it. And this is actually important. There are financial, when we ask, why should we do this? Why should we spend time to try to capitalize some of our expense in software development? Well, there's some financial advantages to it, because basically you can space out the expense over time. And that's good, because if I'm spending, $1 million, but I could spend it off, I want to say it's 10 years, but we'll just say it's 10 years because it makes math easier. I can expense out $100,000 each year for 10 years. It's going to make my bottom line look better, because my bottom line is, right, revenue over expense. However, I want to caution people from doing this, because again, this is a lot of time I've spent with multiple companies, large companies, small companies, talking about this issue of capitalization versus operational expense. And I've done the research, because one of the things I want to ask myself a question, not that I have to follow, quote unquote, the big boys, or whatever you want to call it, the successful companies or the FANG companies or whatever, is if you look at these companies who I think do software development pretty well, companies like Facebook, Alphabet, which is Google, Apple, right? Those companies. The vast majority don't do it. They don't do it at all. They have, over the years, I'm not saying they haven't done it in the past, and maybe they've changed it as of tomorrow, but the last I did the research wasn't that long ago. The best software companies don't do it anymore. They just simply don't. They expense it all. They expense all the work on software development. They don't try to capitalize any of it. Even the ones who do, the percentage of money capitalized versus the percentage of money spent is very, very small. We're talking in the neighborhood of 1 to 5% tops. Now, I've worked for companies that have expensed up to, capitalized up to 25% of their spend. Now, that looks good for the bottom line, but again, why do the best companies not do it? And I think there's a couple reasons why the best companies don't do it. One, it's a murky area in terms of generally accepted accounting principles. I think you can look at it and say there's certain things we can, capitalize, and certain things that we have to expense. And they're based on phases, by the way, which I'll get to in a second. But you have to spend a lot of money to actually capture this information, or at least a lot of companies do. A lot of companies spend an inordinate amount of time chasing this financial benefit, to the point that it slows down the ability to deliver value. So in the end, are we really saving money? Because what we will do, as we do with all financial incentives and processes, is we'll optimize the process for this particular behavior, when the behavior we really should be concentrating on is value delivery. Are we delivering the most value we can in the shortest amount of time? This gets in the way of that. It's really, really hard, though, to quantify this, to say we shouldn't do it or not. I don't think for most companies you should. And I think that companies who capitalize a high percentage of what they do, I think there's some of them might be skating on thin ice on how they do it, just in all honesty. So I think it opens up some I don't know what the proper word for it is liability or something, future liability, because if somebody's doing that at a high percentage, I think there's a lot of questions. The second issue is for those companies that choose to do it. And again, I'm generally not the one making the choice. I will advise one way or another. If a company chooses to do this, then the question is, how do we do this with agility? Because the activities that are capitalizable are mostly what we would consider I'm going to use the word implementation, the coding and testing of the software. Whereas the other parts of the software development cycle, or a lot like research or requirements gathering, those things are not capitalizable. So the question is, how do we therefore track the time that is spent on things like coding and testing versus research requirements gathering? And the activities, if you look at them, actually look like waterfall activities. So we would be tempted, because of chasing the capitalization, to actually move back to a more waterfall approach, because we could do it easier, because we could have a requirements phase, we could have a research phase, right? We could have a coding phase, we could have a testing phase, and it would be really easy to identify those phases because those are waterfall phases. However, we go back to waterfall, what do we get back into? Again, we're slowing down value delivery. There are places that do waterfall, great. But most places that are doing software development are at least attempting to do things with a little more agility. Why do they do it? Because waterfall is very slow. It's slow. So we're slowing down the system just so we can capitalize things in some cases. Now, if we are doing Agile, or we're trying to do Agile, trying to be Agile, whatever you want to say to it, then we're doing much quicker cycles. So if you're a team, you're doing Scrum, you're doing things in 2-week iterations, right? You're doing a little bit of research, a little bit of requirements, coding, testing, et cetera, et cetera. Those things kind of go all into that 2-week sprint. I have to classify that work. And there are easy ways to do it. We did it at one place where we knew that using Scrum, that certain activities in Scrum, right, certain ceremonies, certain events in Scrum would be considered requirements gathering type things. Like if you're going to do refinement, do you classify that as a requirements gathering activity, or do you classify it as coding and testing? Most places will say that's a requirements gathering activity. If you're having daily stand-ups and you're talking about the work itself, which is sometimes up to what is it, 5 hours every 2 weeks or whatever, of a 40-hour a week job, or 10 hours, whatever it may be, that time, can you capitalize it? The answer is generally no. So what we did is we said, based on our scheduling, we know that these percentage of activities are not capitalizable. We take that right off the top. That's easy to do, right? So we take 15, 20%, whatever it may be, off the top. And then with the remaining time, you can actually start to classify it. And you can say, okay, how much did we actually invest in coding and testing activities? And you can do, usually it's an estimate. You can sometimes do it by story points and other things if you want to. I've seen people do it that way. But in the end, the question is, okay, great, what can we capitalize at the end of 2 weeks? And this gets a little bit even trickier because capitalization should only occur once items have been in service, meaning they've been delivered. And the question it becomes, how do we determine that date? This is another thing that I've run into with companies where, we had spent so many hours of debate, so many hours trying to figure out what is the in-service date for this work? And then taking what was done on that work and now putting it on the books, so to speak. Very difficult to do. Again, why a lot of companies probably don't do it anymore. The juice ain't worth the squeeze, as folks said. That's a really important thing. So in an agile way, what you would do is you're delivering work every 2 weeks. You can make certain assumptions about in-service dates based on the work that's done. And so sometimes you just do a look back, for one sprint. You make a general assumption that everything will be delivered in a certain period of time, and that will become your average. If you want to be safe, you can go back a month or 2 months. If you don't want to be riskier, you can go shorter period of time. It really depends on how well you deliver the software. So that's capitalization versus operational. Hopefully that's helpful. I wanted to talk about technical debt. I think most of you probably understand what technical debt is. Technical debt is a metaphor. I was going to put the definition in here. I guess I missed it. That's technical debt right there. It's a metaphor. It's because basically whenever we cut corners in software development, when we're using maybe like project funding for product development, whenever we cut corners in development, we're getting a little debt. We're going into a little bit of debt. That's why it's a metaphor. And the question is that this debt needs to be paid out over time, just like credit card. Think about like credit card. You go to the store, see a pair of shoes, you say, "Hey man, I love those shoes." And they're $250 and you got $100 in your account, but you do have a credit card. So you charge it. Now, if you pay that debt off at the end of the month, great. If not, you're going to accrue interest. And it's the same with code. Now, the problem with technical debt, as most of us know, is as the code gets worse, the quality of the code itself gets worse. It gets harder and harder to add to that software. That's one of the great things about software is we can change it all the time. It's not like we're printing out 10,000 copies of a textbook that if we have an error in it, we're done. You make you have a problem in software, you can fix it. It's easier to make problems too, but you can fix it quickly and easily. So when we do this product work, when we're actually building products, and when we're doing software, when you're building software, you're building products. But if we treat them like projects, you're going to create a lot of technical debt. And this is a big issue. There's another big problem with technical debt. Not only do you have quality issues, not only do you have issues with it slowing down your ability to make changes. Sometimes I think about it like a highway. I liken it to like ordering something from like Amazon or something. You have all these valuable packages sitting on the dock, and you're putting them in trucks, and you're driving those trucks down a one-lane road. And now the problem is you got a lot of valuable stuff, but it can't get anywhere. And this is one of the ways I look at technical debt over time is that you need to create that 2-lane highway, that 3-lane highway, so that you can move more trucks down. That's a good metaphor for technical debt, because what technical debt will do is you might have had a 3-lane highway, but you've just made it into a one-lane dirty road with a 1-lane bridge. That's not too safe. But it doesn't show up somewhere. It doesn't show up somewhere in the financial sense. This has always bothered me. And the reason it bothers me to a certain degree is we're talking about some companies that are publicly traded companies. They have stock. And if you're a publicly traded company, it's every quarter you have to file with, I believe it's with the SEC. And you have to file financial information for the public to see, so that the public can make a decision on whether or not they want to invest in your company, or whether the investment they have is worthwhile. So for me, the fact that I can have some software companies that have a lot of technical debt that I might want to invest in, and I have other companies that have little technical debt that I might want to invest in, I have no way of knowing. It doesn't show up, as far as I know, it doesn't show up on anybody's financial reporting. If somebody knows different, please send me a note, because I'd love to go in and look at their SEC filing, and I'd love to see where they've enumerated technical debt. I think it should belong there. I wrote a blog post about this many years ago. Because technical debt speaks to the quality and long-term viability of your underlying product or products. Your ability to deliver value is going to be directly related to the amount of technical debt that you have. The more technical debt, the less value you can deliver over time. We all have felt this before. To me, technical debt is like trying to run on the beach. And if you get too much, it's like not just running on the beach, like running on quicksand, right? It just slows you down. And it doesn't show up anywhere necessarily right away anyway, but it does show up over time. And that's one of the problems. We're not good as human beings with things that show up over time. Think for example, things like global warming or climate change, right? We're not really good with things like that. We're not built for that because our world wasn't that. Our world was very immediate when it was very physical, when our brains were evolving. So we're not good when we look at long term, right? Most companies aren't anyway, because they're only looking at the next quarter and how I can make more money off my stock options, et cetera. Anyway, if I care about knowing more about the company, I believe that technical debt is something that should show up on the balance sheet. We should see a report. And here's the interesting thing, and I teach this in my class, and some of you might be familiar with it. We can start to quantify technical debt. I don't go into it in this presentation because we certainly don't have time to get through everything. But in my class, I talk about it. And I say, this is something that we can quantify. We weren't able to quantify it before, but we can start to quantify it. I'm not saying it's exact, but neither is expected warranty expense. This is where I think it should show up. And Jeff Singleton saying technical debt is equivalent to a liability on the balance sheet. And thank you for that. I believe that it's much like a warranty expense. If I'm building a product, let's say a refrigerator, there is something that I have to put on my balance sheet, which is expected warranty repair expense, if I offer a warranty. And I think it should be the same type of thing. It's not exactly the same, but I think it's the same type of thing, that we can show that there is a future liability because of the technical debt that we've accumulated, and we do have to address it in one way, shape, or form. Either it's going to impede upon us delivering value, or we're going to have to learn how to pay it down. And it shows to me as the quality and long-term viability of the product. And if the product is paramount to what the company is doing, it shows me to the long-term viability of the company with which I'm investing in. So again, a different way of looking at the world. I don't know anybody who's doing it. If somebody finds somebody who's doing it, please let me know. I want to talk about flow-based accounting. One of the things I talk about in my class, and I refer to the class a lot because obviously a lot of my ideas come from it, and I present obviously at much greater depth and length. But one of the things I present is something called theory of constraints by Ilya Goldratt. Theory of constraints is basically we're going to move as fast as the slowest part of our system. And this is important because the constraint will determine the delivery of the system. And I'm going to show this in a little bit on what this means to accounting. So hopefully we'll get to it. The thing about systemic constraints is we have to understand that a systemic constraint will have a disproportional effect on the overall system. In fact, it has in a very simple system where the constraint doesn't move around, which it does in most systems, especially knowledge-based work that we do. But if you're doing a simple manufacturing flow, and you look at the constraint, it has not only a disproportional effect, it has basically a complete and total effect on the system. And so we have constraints everywhere. We do. Theory of constraints says if we didn't have constraints, then we would tend to deliver, infinite amount of product. He was a physicist. He borrows from physics because it sounds like friction, right? We have that friction. So if we have a disproportional effect on a system of delivery, then our accounting probably should take into account this disproportional effect on the system. Because when we have a disproportional effect on the system, we have a disproportional effect on the financial accounting. The problem is most places will do something called cost accounting. And cost accounting views all inputs as equal and does not consider a disproportional nature of systemic constraints. And so there is a new type of accounting, a different type of accounting. And I'm assuming, again, I'm not a perfect expert, that you could do both types of accounting because they're going to show you different things. They're going to show you two different worlds. But this flow-based accounting is interesting. I could probably do this alongside my cost accounting and see the differences and what they mean to me in terms of making more effective financial decisions. What happens is when cost accounting does not consider the disproportional nature of systemic constraints, that type of accounting can lead to financial decisions that are not optimal. And this is the real interesting thing. You'll see that I use the word optimal quite frequently. And there's a reason I want to use the word optimal frequently, because that's what we should be striving for. It's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's about, are we getting the most value delivered? Are we getting the most profit that we can for this company over the long period of time? And just because we make a profit doesn't mean that we're optimal. So we can stay in business and not be optimal. I'm concerned with optimization when it comes to systems design. So throughput accounting, I'm not going to go into all the things, but I want to just give you a basics so that I can use that to show you how throughput accounting could help us. Throughput accounting basically says our throughput is equivalent to our net sales minus the total variable cost. And we're going to talk about manufacturing. So in this case, the total variable cost is raw materials. I put this in parentheses next to it, I want to increase my throughput. Basically, when I increase my throughput, I'm going to increase my profit. Now, I also have investment, and you'll see that in some of the models here or not, is things that I do that are not a variable cost. It's my inventory, machinery, buildings, other assets and liabilities, things that I just need to invest in over a long period of time. I want to reduce this because these are expenses. Then I have what I consider operating expense. This is money that's spent on getting things through the system. And it's everything that is except the above, including things like maintenance, utilities, keeping the lights on, how much do I pay in rent, what are my taxes, what is my payroll? And again, because these are expenses, I want to reduce those if I can. And it's a pretty simple system, actually. In some cases, a little bit simpler than cost-based accounting. I'm going to show you how cost-based accounting versus throughput accounting might work on a particular profit, because one of the things that we would have to determine as a business, if we would want to say, okay, which product are we building is more profitable? Which one should we be investing more money in? Which one should we spend more time with, et cetera, et cetera? Which one is going to bring us a greater return? Now, I'm going to show you two products that go through 5 different stages. I'm going to show you the raw materials cost. I'm going to show you the cost of each station, right? The cost of doing business at each station. I'm going to show you the total revenue if we sell it. This is product number 1. We're going to make $100 when we sell product number 1, and we're going to reduce that revenue by 10 for raw materials. And then you can see that it follows the top part of this chart: $6, $8, $24, $12, and $12. And then I'm going to have a product number 2 that follows a similar production. This is not unusual, where I have 2 products that are slightly, somewhat the same, but slightly different. So it follows a different flow through the system. And it's got a revenue of 90, which again, less than product number 1, so already not looking good. Raw materials at 30, right? So not looking good because the raw materials are more, and the expense for raw materials are more, and the revenue is less. And it goes 8, 8, 12, 12, 12 at the cost of each part of the system. This is cost-based accounting. So if I were to do cost-based accounting, I would look at it like this. Product number one has a revenue of 100. It has material cost of 10 per unit. It has a labor cost of 62 per unit, if we add those up across the top line. So it has a profit of $28 per unit. Looking pretty good. Product number two has a revenue of 90, as we said before, has a raw materials cost of 30 per unit, and it has a labor that is equivalent to 52. Therefore, the profit based on cost accounting is $8 per unit. So what is my decision if I'm using cost accounting? My decision is I'm going to make a heck of a lot more of product number one. It is more profitable. However, we did not consider the constraint. And in this case, the constraint is going to be at station number 3. So let's take a look and put in the constraint numbers. Here's my constraint in red. Product number one, I can do 20 a day. This is per day at station 1, 15 a day at station 2, 5 a day at station 3, 10 and 10, stations 4 and 5. Right? These are the number of units. Product number two, however, I can do 20, 10, 10, 10, and 10, right? You can see that. So product number two is actually cheaper and easier at the constraint. And that's important because what we're going to do is we're going to show the disproportional effect that the constraint has on our ability to manufacture and deliver and sell the product. So let's look at it now. Throughput accounting says that what we want to look at is we want to look at revenue minus raw material cost to get a throughput. And then we take that throughput and multiply it by the number of items that move through the system per day to get our profit per day. Product number one has a throughput of 90, which is good, but I can only move 5 of them per day through the system, which means that for some reason it takes me longer to make them, probably at station number 3. So my profit is $450 a day, 5 units at 90. Product number two, which wasn't looking very good, it still only has a throughput of 60 per unit, but we can move more units through the system every day. So the profit for product number two per day would be $600. Now, this is a bit geeky, but I think most of you can follow that if we're looking for what is more accurate in this scenario, throughput accounting is more accurate. And sometimes throughput accounting is referred to as business decisioning accounting, because it allows us to make better business decisions. Because there's a couple decisions I can make now that I probably wouldn't have made before because of cost accounting. One of the decisions might be, I want to invest more money in increasing the throughput of product number one at station number 3. Right? That's a viable decision. And with throughput accounting, I can ask myself the question, what is my additional investment? What is my additional throughput? And then I can calculate how much more profit I'm making per day because of throughput accounting. Cost accounting won't tell me that. Right? Maybe I'll increase the cost of creating the things at station number 3. So it might show me a little bit, but it's not going to be as accurate. I might decide that I'll just build more of product number 2 as is and not build as much of product number 3 because it's less profitable. There's all kinds of decisions I could make, right? To try to figure out how now, using this type of accounting, which things should I do? And for me, optimization is about agility, our ability to make change effectively and quickly, and decisions, our ability to make decisions regarding change effectively and successfully or optimally. This is what it allows us to do. It allows us to make better decisions quicker. So just go into a lot of detail to just show you that cost accounting isn't always right. I've got some other problems and issues with cost accounting, which I just want to go through briefly. We need to understand that profit the ability to charge more for our items is more important than cutting costs. When we do cost-based accounting, we have a tendency to cut costs. We showed you that the product costs and cost-based accounting might allow us to make decisions that are not as profitable. And cost accounting incentivizes large inventories. We should keep the inventory value low. Perhaps the biggest issue I have with cost accounting is that when we price products, we should be pricing based on value delivered, not cost to deliver. We shouldn't just say, hey, it costs us $100 to deliver this. We want to make a 50% markup, therefore we're going to charge $150 per unit. I don't think that's what Apple does. I'd be very surprised. I don't know what their costs are, but they have high margins. Why? Because they price based on the value. This is the value we deliver. And because of it, it made them one of the most profitable companies in the history of the world. We should always focus on value more than we focus on cost. Not that cost isn't important, right? It's part of the ratio, but if we focus on cost alone, this is part of the problem that we have right now. Other than, this FOMO that leaders have, that everybody else is cutting staff, so I'm going to cut staff too, because if I don't, people are going to ask me uncomfortable questions about how do I determine how much staff, blah, blah, blah. It's just much easier to go with flow. But we're concentrating on cost. You shouldn't make your determination on what you do and who you hire and who you fire and who you keep or who you lay off based on cost alone. You have to ask the question of value. Most people don't do it. Last and final, I'm looking at the time, and I don't see a whole lot of questions, but if there's time, we'll get to them. So if you have some questions that you want to talk about, now's a good time, and I appreciate you all hanging with me. I've got one more thing I want to talk briefly about. I think the other thing we have to understand about finance is that finance is deeply tied to incentives. And we need to understand that incentives and motivation are much, much different in the world of knowledge work than they are in the world of physical work. Those of you who have taken my class or familiar with my class or interested in my class, we talk about two books in particular that talk about this very human part of knowledge work and knowledge workers. And the two books are Drive and Peopleware. Drive is by Daniel Pink. If you're not familiar with it, it's great. I encourage you all to look them up online and try to find, somebody did a whiteboard animation of one of his talks. Fascinating stuff. Peopleware, written a long, long time ago, DeMarco and Lister. It was the book that I read that kind of changed my worldview on software and software developers and knowledge workers in general, and how we're different. Financial incentives, the carrot and stick. Sometimes we talk about carrot and stick. And this is what Drive and Peopleware talk to us about, especially Drive specifically. They should be used when the work is physical, mundane, or rote. It should be used when we're not doing the work because it fills us intrinsically. We're not doing something we want to do, personally. It's for those of us, I think most of you, hopefully, at some point in your life, you learn a lot by doing physical work. I think a lot of us have done physical work. I've worked in warehouses and things. It's merely physical work. I'm not fulfilled necessarily by the work. I mean, it's great to get paid at the end of the day, but I'm not doing it because I want to do it. I'm not doing it necessarily because it's fun. I'm doing it because I'm getting paid to do it. And interestingly enough, if one of the jobs I did, which I actually really enjoyed, so this might not be a good example, but I used to make magnets in a magnet factory. And it was physical work. I mean, you'd go home and be dirty and sweaty and things like that. The work that I did was physical. And if they paid me and said, Larry, if you make 10% more magnets tonight, I'm going to pay you 10% more. It's probably going to incentivize me to work a little bit harder, because when I'm, sore or tired or run down, I'll look at that and say, hey, yeah, sure. Or, obviously we're going to punish you if your numbers go down. which is funny enough. I think we do a little bit more punishment in the world of work than we do positive incentives. I think there's a lot more sticks than carrots. But anyway, we're not doing this work because it's something we want to do. But a lot of folks in knowledge work, I mean, there's some folks in knowledge work who don't find their work intrinsically fulfilling. That's why I say mundane and rote stuff. There's some mundane work in knowledge work that we all have to get through. But a lot of us, myself included, right? Those of you who know me, you probably get it through the work that we've done together or some of these presentations. I get pretty passionate about this stuff. It's really important to me. I want to be good at it. And it's not just that financial incentives don't work when people are like me, where I'm intrinsically motivated to do this, motivated from the inside, but it often demotivates and discourages people, because we will then feel mercenary. And it robs the intrinsic nature of the joy in the work that I have. Last week, I don't know if any of you joined us for our show last week. We had Rich Sheridan on. He's the author of book Joy Inc. and Chief Joy Officer. Talks a lot about joy of work. He is the head of Menlo Innovations in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Fantastic and fascinating company, because he talks about joy. Knowledge workers, we crave that joy, not just the money. I mean, if you didn't pay us, we're probably going to go somewhere where people paid us. But if everybody gets paid about the same for the type of job you do, we're not going to leave that job just for the money. Now when HR, if they even do this, asks us after the fact, why did you leave, right? They do those exit interviews. We're going to say money, because it ends the conversation. I mean, but it's not real. We left the job because we weren't allowed to do the job that we could do, that we wanted to do. There was something in the system that was built on this mistaken notion that knowledge workers are the same as physical workers, that we need to have carrots and sticks. We don't. I'm going to do the job if you let me do it. But you set up a system of incentives, you set up a system of work, you've set up based on what I would consider a faulty view of the world. And that causes all kinds of problems, because I don't do the work merely for the incentive. If I did the work for the incentive, all I am is a mercenary. It cheapens what I do. I'm not a mercenary at what I do, and I hope that most of you aren't mercenaries at what you do. I hope you care deeply about what you do. But we get that beat out of us, don't we? By the systems that we've created, by the financial systems we've created, by the financial incentives we've created, we get that beat out of us over time. And then we get to a point where we're disengaged. Gallup does a poll every year. They say, are you engaged in your work, or blah, blah, blah. And they have this whole criteria, and they've been doing it for decades and decades. Again, something I talk about in the class. About 1 in 3 people are engaged in their work, according to Gallup. 2 in 3 are disengaged. And they asked Gallup, they said, why are people disengaged in their work? And they said, basically because people have managers and the managers aren't good. And I would go further to say, if you are in knowledge work, you don't need to be managed. You don't need a manager. What you need is a leader. A leader will inspire you. I don't need to be motivated. I need to be inspired. If you give me the ability to do what I do, I am going to do wonderful things. But don't try to manage me, right? Because we don't need to be. I give this talk to so many people in my class, thousands and thousands of people over the years. I ask them, raise your hand if you need to be managed. Not many people raise their hands. We don't need to be managed. We need to be led. We need to be inspired. We don't need to be managed. We don't need to be motivated. We don't need carrots and sticks. Now, we all have to eat, and we all should get paid. But as Dan Pink says, the whole issue of money is to take the issue of the money off the table. Pay us enough so that we're not thinking about it, so that we're thinking about the work that we want to do, and then get in our way and let us do it. So we have to be very, very careful about how we use financial incentives, because most people and most companies don't use them in a way that actually achieves what they hope to achieve. And that's a big problem. And that's my presentation. I look at the time, I said it would be about an hour. And then if we had any questions, I would certainly entertain any questions. So now is your time. We did get a few comments while I was talking about Warren said that, yes, he was a general in the Air Force. That was about the Bill Creech story. Thank you, Warren. And Jeff, as I mentioned before, said that technical debt equivalent to a liability on the balance sheet, which I agree with. I think it needs to be. I haven't seen it yet. But again, if somebody has seen that, please let me know. So I'm going to hang. Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any comments, things that they want to put in the chat? Anybody still awake? Talking about finance isn't always the most inspiring and awesome thing, but it's really important. So I'm going to, since I don't see any questions, I'm going to wrap it up here just briefly. Oh, no, I saw one's coming in. Oh, just a comment. Thank you. Somebody loved the presentation and glad that I discussed detail. I appreciate that. Here's what I found. The way we use money in finance, the way we account for things in our systems will greatly affect the behavior of the people in that system. And if we seek to be optimal, we need to take a deep, hard look at that. And one of the things that I have found with Agile coaches is that they spend their time, most of their time, working with teams. And there's nothing wrong with that. We want the people doing the work to be successful. But the basic problem is this: if we do not get our incentives correct, then we do not have a good soil for Agile to grow, for agility to grow. Forget about Agile. I don't want to stop using that word, talk about agility. It's more important. We do not have a good soil for that agility to grow, and we need to make sure that we have it. So a lot of the efforts of coaches and groups of coaches who go in to do a transformation, they're not greatly successful in changing the bottom line because they're swimming upstream. They're trying to take the seeds of agility and throwing them on concrete and hoping that they're going to grow. And what we really, really need to do is slow down and step back for a second and ask ourselves a question. What behavior are the incentives in our system forcing or guiding? And how do we change the underlying systems, the underlying incentives, the underlying accounting and finance so that we can be more successful in the future? So you can also always think about it really like the technical debt metaphor. If you do not address the financial systems and incentive systems of your organization, that is a debt that needs to be paid. And any work that you try to do to affect meaningful change within that organization, it's going to take you longer, and it's going to be much, much harder if you can do it at all. So pay attention to your finance, pay attention to your incentives. I really appreciate you all joining today. I appreciate there's some nice comments that folks have left as we close.